Morning. I want to Good morning, Ms. Bergamini. I wish to remind you that today's activities will be made publicly available by live broadcast on the Chamber of Deputies Web TV. Online participation of colleagues is allowed according to the rules set out by the Council for Regulation. On our agenda today is an informal hearing with Giorgi Kalandarishvili. Welcome. He is the chair of the Central Election Commission of Georgia regarding the political situation in Georgia. And also on behalf of our colleagues, I wish to welcome and thank Mr. Kalandarishvili for making himself available and for joining us online. As a reminder, the Central Election Commission is the supreme body of Georgia's electoral administration. Its powers include the management and oversight of election commissions at all levels and ensures the standard application of election legislation. The Central Election Commission is composed of no more than 17 members. The rules were recently amended. The Parliament of Georgia elects 7 of them, as well as the president for a 5-year term, while no more than 9 members are appointed by the parties in compliance with the electoral law. Now, our Foreign Affairs Committee has long been following Georgia's political evolution and its path of rapprochement with the European Union, a process supported by Italy. Last May, a commission delegation went on a mission to Tbilisi, meeting several times with representatives of institutions, parties, and civil society. Therefore, we are especially interested in the upcoming elections on October 26, which will take place under a new electoral system, a pure proportional system with a 5% threshold, which happened in a very complex political phase. And the fairness of the electoral process will be crucial, and it is a subject of attention by many European parliaments, including ours. Let me also mention that in 2020, the Council of Europe launched the Supporting Transparency, Inclusiveness, and Integrity of Electoral Practice and Process in Georgia program, and that within that framework, Chairman Kalandarishvili and a delegation of the CEC were in Strasbourg in June on a study mission. And given the limited amount of time available, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Kalandarishvili immediately for his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Very good morning, everyone. Thank you for such a brief introduction about the Georgian system. I'm really very honored today being able to meet with all of you, dear parliamentarians, and we have this opportunity to meet with you and share some of important aspects from the Georgian preparation work. For that reason, I would like to thank each of you for coordinating this meeting, as well as I would like to meet Mr. Simon Billy for his presence in Georgia, for the fruitful exchange we had with him, and many thanks for his commitment. So as for us, as it was well said, on 26th of October, we will have parliamentarian election where, according to the last amendments made to the Constitution of Georgia, Georgian voters will be able to elect their desired political party with the so-called closed lists, so no majoritarians anymore. At the same time, it should be mentioned that this election is also important for various aspects. Speaking from the perspective of election administration, like this is the first time when we will be conducting election under the new candidate status, and therefore it means that the proper standards should be on board considered. At the same time, this is the election when we will be introducing a large-scale technological intervention, and this will be very important for Georgian voters because this made us to change our strategic plan and action plans accordingly to the amendments done into the Georgian legislation, and in order to raise the awareness of Georgian voters about the novelties, about the electoral behavioral change, and so on and so forth. Let me update you about the political party registration process. Altogether, 27 political parties have applied for registration and they have successfully registered, but only 19 have submitted political party list. And 3 days ago, the political party registration process has been over, according to which 18 political parties, election subjects, will be participating in these elections. So there is one more day that they have, just in case if they will, to reject their denied participation. And after this deadline is over, we will start dealing with ballot papers, their design, and bringing these election subjects to the ballot paper, starting printing process, recording the information, and so on and so forth. At the same time, it should be mentioned that as a novelty, for the first time, we have given the opportunity to political parties to submit party lists electronically, remotely, and this was also very positively assessed by their side. At the same time, you know, as for the conditions related to NGO registration, the Central Commission of Georgia has successfully registered all local observer organizations that met the requirements established by the Georgian election legislation. So far, more than 60 local observer organizations are registered with more than 800 observers. More than 40 international observer organizations are registered with more than 210 observers, and more than 40 accredited media outlets with more than 250 journalists for this moment. Of course, there are still deadlines for this, and therefore, according to the practice, we can say that the majority of applies will be done in the latest period. At the same time, it should be mentioned that 3,031 polls have been created, out of which 2,263 will be equipped with technologies, and the rest, 768, will be conducted in a regular way. When speaking about the technologies, it should be mentioned that 90% of Georgian voters will be able to utilize their votes using the technologies. And when speaking about the technologies, we should mention, on the one hand, the use of voter verification machines, and on the other hand, vote counting machines. In addition to that, as a third component, we will be using tablets that will be used directly to transmit the results straight from polling stations to the Central Election Commission server. And it means that according to 8 pilots we have conducted here, and according to the analysis of the pilots, we can predict that the announcement of preliminary results will take place somewhere between 9 p.m. to 9:30, 10 p.m. Of course, as earlier we will receive, we will be able to announce them earlier. But of course, according to the pilots, we can predict that to have these results somewhere between 9 to 10 p.m. As you know, at 8 o'clock, the voting process is over. At the same time, in order to support political party registration, the Election Commission has adopted different decrees and ordinances that was supportive to their work. And I will not pay more attention into details. It is the procedure for casting votes to define the sequence numbers of the election subjects have been defined, and many others related to their smooth registration process. In order to develop the electoral culture, as well as to reach out the majority of voters about the informing them about the use of technologies and about the novelties, we have conducted large-scale information campaign launched a year and a half ago successfully that engaged over 600,000 voters in a direct intervention, and the campaign was focused on educating the public about new technologies. At the same time, informational, educational meetings for the representatives of political parties and observer organizations have been conducted. And in order to reflect the recommendation of NDI done just a couple of months ago, indicated in the preliminary assessment document, we have conducted a nationwide demonstration of electronic voting project, thereby addressing one of the recommendations provided by NDI, and it combined both theoretical instruction and hands-on experience to familiarize voters with the new technologies. Also, mock elections conducted at 589 election precincts across the country, including regions densely populated with ethnic minorities, and voters had the possibility to personally experience how the vote counting devices function in practice. At the same time, it should be mentioned that in order to bring and ensure the maximum transparency and publicity of the process, compliance audit will be conducted to the machine. American company ProVNV, who is one among two other accredited organizations, they have revealed as successful, according to the market research that has been conducted by the Central Election Commission, and this company will conduct compliance audit to the technologies that will be conducted in 3 phases, including the revision of source code and other functionalities, and to provide the report proving that these machines are in line with international good practices as well as in line with Georgian legislation. Besides the fact that there is no need of conducting such compliance audit, and even it's not the obligation from the law, still in order to reflect the European standards, as well as to remove all, to answer all questions, as well as to remove all myths related to the technologies, we decided to make such intervention in this process. And we are really happy having such prominent and solid company who will do such kind of compliance audit. At the same time, it should be mentioned that we are not alone in this process. Technological company Smartmatic, who is currently submitted in the United States, presented in the United States, in Canada, Estonia, Belgium, Albania, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and other countries. They have experienced modernizing elections in more than 30 countries. They will be supporting Technological Election Commission of Georgia with the technologies. At the same time, when we are speaking about technologies, it should be mentioned that we will be using paper trail in all steps and in all procedures that gives the possibility to audit and monitor the results, the voting procedure, and at the same time, it will be important to obtain high publicity and transparency of the process. At the same time, it should be mentioned that more than 52,000 election administrators will be administering the elections, out of which literally the half of this amount we are appointed by respective political parties, and the half are elected by respective election commissions. At the same time, in order to respond to the inclusivity of the process, election administration has identified as the priority area dealing with the issues related to representatives of ethnic minorities as well as persons with physical disabilities. And we are ensuring that all citizens, including ethnic minorities and individuals with disabilities, can fully participate in the elections. The commitment is exemplified by the CEC's focus on different activities, and therefore we are pretty much active in this direction. There are permanent working groups created for this reason, and we are very closely collaborating with the public defender, ombudsman office on that regard, and so on and so forth. At the same time, it should be mentioned that we have established precincts, 60 election precincts at 53 cities of 42 countries. According to the information provided by MFA of Georgia on 25th of September, more than 65,000 voters who are on the consulate registry will be able to participate. And tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, we will receive the updated information from their side, as the voter registration process has been over just 2 days ago, and accordingly we will have the final figures on that regard. At the same time, it should be mentioned that we are pretty much challenged. We've been in an disinformation and information environment where we had on a daily basis. We have to identify such malign information and malicious information that spreads throughout the media, to respond to them in order to ensure the security of the voters from wrong perceptions that might damage the election environment and the integrity of the elections. Therefore, this is one of the focus areas from our side that we are pretty much concerned. That is exactly what we are sharing with our international partners on a daily basis, to provide them with the verified and objective information about ongoing processes. At the same time, biased observation missions might be somehow challenging in this direction, because we have identified already some particular cases where different representatives from different observer groups are disseminating quite affiliated information to some political parties, and even OSCE in their previous reports were highlighting this issue about the fake observation and about the affiliated observation. So therefore, this might be somehow the subject of our concern in that regard. So this is very shortly just to update you. And one more thing, we have the code of conduct has been suggested to all political parties having electoral registration, and the document on pre-election agitation is based on the key principles of the 2024 European Parliament elections. And it should be mentioned that we have acted here as a neutral, independent body and have offered them such kind of code of conduct. And for this moment, only 6 political parties joined the code of ethics. At the same time, similar documents, but based on different principles, have been suggested to local NGOs. And just a couple of days ago, we have concluded this document with them, targeting on cooperation, targeting on avoiding disinformation, and so on and so forth. So this is very briefly the information about the ongoing preparation work. Of course, there are plenty of activities and plenty of issues to be discussed, but I think that due to the fact that we have the time constraint, and of course there might be questions or clarifications needed to the interesting areas to you, I'm more than happy to respond and to discuss some issues with you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll now be happy to hand over to my colleagues if they have questions. MP Bergamini would like to begin. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Kalandarishvili for giving us this broad scenario with respect.
No. Yes, I apologize, but I'm asking you to speak Italian. Officially, you are required to speak Italian. It's protocol. Okay, thank you very much to the chairman of the commission. Thank you for your very complete and thorough overview of the preparations underway for the elections. You yourself have said that these are long-awaited elections indeed. In fact, there is much expectation in countries who are friendly with Georgia and other countries as well. So we know that there's been a lot of focus on the issue of transparency of the elections and accountability accountability of the outcome. I have a couple of questions for you. The first is, what expectations do you have in terms of the turnout? How many people will show up for the vote? According to your estimates, do you think that many people will participate and vote or not? My second question is that you mentioned a mis- and disinformation campaign, and I'm wondering if you might explain what you mean by disinformation. Where do you think this campaign is coming from? Who is running the campaign? And what kinds of corrective measures are you adopting, just to get a better understanding of what is happening? Thank you very much, and I apologize for interrupting you. MP Honori has the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I wish to thank Chairman Kalandarishvili for his remarks. I am interested in asking you a couple of questions. One has to do with the OSCE and ODIHR recommendations coming from previous electoral recommendations. So my question is, for your electoral commission, where are the greatest difficulties? Where have you encountered more challenges in implementing the recommendations? And in particular, media coverage. Do you think that for this election, do you think Georgia has managed to improve? I'm also an electoral observer, and I've participated in this mission, so we are indeed interested in knowing about the freedom, of course, of elections and transparency and the fairness of elections, because, of course, we want to know about this when I ask you about media coverage. That was my first point. My second point is this now. We'll know what the outcome of the elections will be, I think, already in the evening of election day. At least we'll have a partial outcome, partial results. Now, should there not be acceptance? Should they not accept maybe a party, a political party, or the majority party? If they don't accept the electoral result, what might your Central Electoral Commission do? What would your role be should they not accept the outcome? And are you expecting this to occur? Do you think it is likely that this might occur? Thank you very much. I don't know if any of our colleagues have other questions. I myself have some questions. So let me proceed, and then we'll see if there are others. The first question has to do with the diaspora. There are many Georgians living abroad in multiple European countries, and not only in Europe, to organize elections so that they can participate is always an additional challenge. So what decisions have been made by the Electoral Commission in order to encourage the vote on behalf of the diaspora? And bearing in mind this in particular, firstly, electoral turnout has always been quite low, but I'm sure that considering that there are new technologies now available for elections, I'm sure that you hope to increase voter participation and turnout. So I'm confident that observers have also been monitoring this. And also, if there are any countries in which voter participation has been limited for security reasons. I'm sure it's not easy to organize voting in Ukraine and Israel, for example, because at the moment the situation is quite complicated. So have you opened any polling stations in Ukraine or in Israel, for example? That's my question. We'd like to try to get a better understanding of that. Now, moving along, what I'm not so clear about is how you're going to post electoral results, how you're going to disclose them. Will that occur at the end of the election or as the polling stations are shut down? Another question is this. I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, that you are familiar with the report published by Transparency International on the electoral process and what happened over the years in connection with the replacement of members of the public service on the one hand, and on the other, information collection on voters. There have been issues raised on information collection or profiling of voters, and I think that the Commission has already handed down a decision. The vote has to be free and transparent, and there should be no coercion of voters. And the fact that they've collected so much data on these voters, well, I imagine that this is something that you've debated in the Electoral Commission, and I do believe that there have been some decisions handed down on this point. Thank you. If we have no further questions, I'm happy to hand over to the chairman so that he may reply.
The floor is yours.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for your questions and the kind clarifications requested. But first of all, I would like to, if it is possible, to technically correct, because I hear many voices and it's disrupting a little bit because it's difficult to speak at the same time, if correction is possible. So as for the turnout, first question related to so first of all, let me say that the political results and political activism is not the target of the election administration. So this is up to the politicians and political parties how they will motivate voters in that regard. From our side, what we do within our competence is to inform the voters about their rights, about their novelties, about the services we provide, and how secure they might feel themselves on the e-day. So therefore, and after this, of course, they might be motivated to participate in the election. But the turnout generally during each of the parliamentarian elections is always high. To say so, especially according to the international practice when technological intervention is on the ground, it also makes it sign on this process, and as there is a high interest to the technologies, it also raises somehow the turnout. So therefore, we cannot predict any figures, but what else we can say from the practice, we could say that this is always somewhere between 60%, 55, 60% plus minus. So therefore, we more or less we can anticipate to have such. But once again, I would like to reiterate that this is not the field of interest of our institution, and therefore we are not predicting or calculating this direction, but only from the figures from previous election and statistics in dynamics we can anticipate to have more or less such presence in the e-day. As for the misinformation and the measures and from whom this is distributed, also, first of all, it should be mentioned that whenever some positive activities are conducted by the election administration, it's hard to hear so many voices here, duplicated voices. So, first of all, it should be mentioned that this is coming from different stakeholders, from some political parties, from some local observer groups, and when we analyze, thank you very much, it has been corrected. And when analyzing this information, we can see that as they are groundless and they are manipulated, we can make a conclusion that they are targeted, and accordingly, we're speaking about such misinformation. For example, here diaspora participation has been raised when this issue also was used for political manipulation. And why? I've been personally working in this institution for 16 years. It's just 3 years that I'm holding chairman position. Before I've been the head of legal department and have been holding different leading positions in the institution. And I'm pretty much aware about the legal regulations on this issue. And it should be mentioned that from speaking from the principle side, the principle in the election code is the same what has been in the law in 2008 and even earlier. The only thing that is changing in this regulation is some time frames when the voters are given the opportunity to register themselves if they are not on the consulate registry and being given the possibility to participate in the election. And even this time, like in every time before every general elections where voters being overseas are given the right to participate in the election, this issue is always becoming a victim of speculation. For example, like our dear voters, repats being abroad, have been given wrong information as if as less than 50, more than 50 voters with their own signatures can apply to the Election Commission or to the MFA requesting opening additional polling stations when such procedures are not prescribed in the law. As we know, even from the European practice, that the majority of such cases, except some exceptions like Moldova, Romania, and Bulgaria case, where additional polls are open, but they have their respective legislative regulation of this issue, in the majority of cases, polls are opened in diplomatic missions. But when these are requested to open in other additional places, of course, this is absolutely groundless. And when you are asking such requests to be done by the election administration or MFA, of course, there is no ground of making such exception when everyone knows well that this is the situation, this is the regulation that has been in the law within the many of years. And when listening such accusations and allegations from, especially from political party representatives of the legislative body, when if they think that something else needs to be improved or developed in the law, of course they are the ones, firstly, who have such accessibility to the initiatives in the law legislative body to initiate, to improve some procedures if they see that there is a room or space for such need of such improvement. And
Scusi,
therefore,
Presidente. Mi scusi,
topic,
Presidente.
as in previous years.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for interrupting.
Credo che la migliore...
Let me just say that I think that the best answer on the issue of disinformation would be in the numbers. I would like to know if you have any numbers regarding the polling stations opened abroad. Now, considering the fact that we have 1.5 million expatriates abroad, and in previous elections, 66,000 Georgian citizens voted, that's not a large number. So I'm wondering, again, how many polling stations have been opened for this election compared to the previous election? And more specifically, I would also like to understand why it is that for security reasons, they didn't open any polling stations in Ukraine, where we know that there is a considerable Georgian diaspora, whereas they've opened polling stations in Israel, where the security situation is comparable, if not even worse, than the one in Ukraine. Whereas in Israel, you did open more polling stations and not in Ukraine. This is what I'm trying to understand. And I'm asking you this because I want to have a better understanding of the situation. And if you have any data, then we don't need to accuse anyone of disinformation.
Let me start that this answer was not a response to your question about diaspora voting. This was the example of disinformation and targeted information campaigns spread throughout the media. So I will respond to your question, of course, later on. But as for the disinformation, as mentioned, what are the measures also has been questioned to me. The measures that we have the Information Protection Center operating throughout the 24 hours, where we have the operators, and we are doing kind of a debunking, pre-bunking procedures. We identify such wrong information, fake information disseminated, and of course we have the proper methodology that we have elaborated with the support of our different partners. And with that, we identify the risk of such disinformation spread and decide proper measures to react on them. It might be public statement, or it might be proactive information campaigns in order to remove the vulnerability to the wrong information spread throughout the media. At the same time, to the next question that was related to the OSCE ODA recommendations and as well as media coverage, I'm very sorry they've been wrongly, not correctly received, and has been several times interrupted. And I just heard that it was about the media coverage and it was about OSCE ODA recommendations. So first of all, if I correctly understood, all those recommendations that were targeted to the election administration, it should be mentioned that all of them have been fully considered in our work, and no one will say that any recommendation has been left without intention. Of course, if there have not been any possibility to consider it, but I would say that literally we have considered all that was issued towards the election administration. As for the media coverage, election administration is not the right authority who is controlling the media coverage. This is up to Communication Commission and their authority. So therefore, if I correctly understood and heard the question, or maybe later on we can clear up the question. As for the partial results and whether if there will be partial results announced and what can be done in order if the different stakeholders will not accept it. First of all, it should be mentioned the Central Election Commission is doing everything in order to provide maximum transparency and publicity of the whole process. With that regard, it should be mentioned that what is counted by machines, it will be immediately recounted annually. And this is really an unprecedented case in the Georgian elections when such high number of results will be recounted. In addition to that, it means that everyone will have the full accessibility to the results counting process as well as results transmission process, and therefore the process is fully auditable. And what else is printed out by the machines, the first preliminary results, they are immediately disseminated among authorized persons being present to the polling stations, and later on, straight immediately after this dissemination, it will be transmitted from the polling station to the Central Election Commission, that will be immediately uploaded on the web page and publicly available to any interested person. And as mentioned at the beginning, we will have the first preliminary results somewhere between 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. And this will be also really unprecedented case compared to the previous elections, when in a minimized time we will have first preliminary results. But this is the technical side and political one. And as for if it's not will be accepted, of course, this is not something within the field of our competence. What can we do in that regard? What else we can do here is our transparent work, our public work, the information, objective information and verified information that we are providing to public, we are providing to our international partners and the different stakeholders. And of course, we have such experience from 2020 when these results have not been accepted, and this initiated the political crisis, and it initiated some political movements in the country. But fortunately, what we have seen later on, after the investigation committee results have been publicly published, that there was no irregularity, no violations in the law, but there were some some aspects that caused such malicious information campaign that really damaged the reputation of the election administration and the reputation of the election process itself. And even till now, we are gaining these results from this 2020 election when we were really hardly discredited from this malign information campaigns. And of course here, the only thing we can do, and we are doing, this is the collaboration between our international partners, where we rely on pretty much because for their impartial assessment of the process and their commitment to this process, as well as our public and transparent work. And why we're such relying? Because you have your own methodology, how you're assessing the process. It means that you are listening to the information from various stakeholders, analyzing this information and making your own conclusions. Not only doing it in a way, like some of in isolated cases, different stakeholders listen only to one side, one political party or different interlocutor, and make their own conclusions relied on this information. So therefore, what else we can do here, and the only thing is the continuation of our public and transparent work, and of course, collaboration with our international partners. As for diaspora and their participation, here was one of the challenging issues, participation of IDPs, internally displaced persons being abroad, and those having the registration address to the occupied territories. And unfortunately, the law did not give the possibility to somehow give them right to participate if they were on the consulate registry. For this reason, one of the oppositional party, as well as public defender, have applied to the CEC to regulate this issue with its decree. And it should be mentioned that this was the public admiration that the case was also used for speculations, requesting from the CEC to give these people right, but when requesting to regulate the issue with the decree, it means that it was not the case of the CEC, but it was the case somehow related to the law when this issue has not been regulated fully. Therefore, we have discussed this issue and we had a full consensus on adopting such decree, of course with some modifications, and we gave the right to more than hundreds of voters, Georgian voters who are abroad, who are IDPs, and who have their registration address in the occupied territories. But there are some other cases when this issue has been, as already mentioned, manipulated. For example, not opening additional polls when there is no any regulation in the law providing such legal authority for the MFA or the Central Election Commission to make some such kind of additions. As for the Ukraine and Israel, it should be mentioned that it is clearly prescribed in the election code that the only ground to set up polls abroad is the information provided by MFA, the Central Election Commission, and we have identified that in Israel case, they have been provided information for more than 1,000 voters residing in Israel. But yesterday, we have we established the poll in Israel, but not in Ukraine, because Ukraine has not been provided to us. But in Israel case, yesterday we received a letter from MFA describing the situation in Israel and speaking about the risks of possible intervention in the polling station work, for example, in case of alert, in case of such signals. And therefore, in these upcoming days, Central Election Commission will go back to this issue and we will start revision of whether we will leave polling station in Israel, or we will cancel the presence of such polling station in Israel. So, according to the results, I think that I have already explained it, but let me once again reiterate that the vote counting machines will print out preliminary results in the polling station. It will be disseminated to the authorized persons being present, and only after this it will be transmitted to the Central Election Commission. As mentioned at the beginning, in 90% of voters, we will have these modernized polls, so-called modernized polls, but in the rest 10%, we will have the regular traditional voting procedures. But it should be mentioned that tablets also will be used in these traditional polling stations, and at the same end, and it means that also the results from these polling stations will be transmitted also to the Central Election Commission, of course, in the time frames as soon as they will manually finalize with these counting procedures. As for information profiling and collecting, as mentioned from the TI report, so it should be mentioned that what else is happening outside the polling station is not within the competence of the election administration. I fully understand the concern raised by you, as well as indicated in the TI report, as if they might be collecting some personal information or some data related to the voters. But of course, if the issue is related to personal data protection and some other information, of course, this is within the competence of the Information Protection Agency and their field of authority in that regard. But of course, if there is some case, the violation of the law, of course, this might influence the whole election process. Whole election process. But besides the fact that we have heard some manipulative information on this regard, what else has been done outside the polling station and even outside the 100-meter radius outside the polling station, of course, this might influence the election process. But first of all, when speaking about such allegations, it should have the proper evidences and it should have the proper effects in order to give the respective institutions to investigate, to conduct administrative hearings on that regard, and to prove whether it was the breach of the law or no. So this issue is out of the field of our competence, but still this is the comment on this issue. Thank you very much. If I correctly understood the questions, as well as if I'm missing something, please, you are more than welcome to clarify and raise and remind me any other issues.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We have Madam Onori, who has a final question. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I have a couple of other very brief follow-up questions for you. This morning you mentioned disinformation a number of times. Therefore, I want to ask you if you have noticed any activities on disinformation coming from Russia or from any other external players from other countries. Have you monitored any pro-Russian disinformation campaigns? Or have you not observed any such campaigns? And if I understood correctly, in case of any doubts regarding the electoral outcome, your commission would repeat the vote count, and therefore you would access the electoral acts. So this is the role of your commission, if I understood correctly. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, if I understood correctly, there are no polling stations for the Georgian diaspora in Ukraine? No polling stations, did I understand correctly? I'd like to ask you how many Georgian citizens are currently in Ukraine? How many thousands of Georgian citizens are currently in Ukraine? And who is it that should have sent you information regarding the presence of the Georgian diaspora in Ukraine so that polling stations could be opened? And when you do not receive any requests to open polling stations in a country with the presence of Georgian citizens, do you have any procedures to verify as to why you did not receive a request for the opening of polling stations despite the presence of a large Georgian community in those countries? Thank you. And I also have a follow-up question for you, Mr. Chair. You explained the mechanism with which the polling stations are open for the Georgian diaspora. You refer to information coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I am assuming you refer to the Georgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in some countries, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has asked to open polling stations, and in others it has not, including Ukraine. So why is it that the Georgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has not asked to open polling stations in Ukraine? Is there a mechanism through which the Central Election Commission can refer to other public administrations so that you can allow for the highest number of Georgian citizens to participate in the vote? Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. So let me combine the questions related to the overseas voting and it is Ukraine or any other country. So first of all, the procedure is the following, that the ground for the Central Election Commission to open particular polling station abroad is relied on the information provided by MFA. And what else is provided by MFA? MFA provides us with the information about the voters being on a consulate registry, and as a minimum it should be 50 in each location, and they provide the address of the country and of the location. It will be diplomatic mission, consulate or embassy, and the polling stations will be opened. So the Central Election Commission does not have any ground, and it's not within our authority to revise why they have provided us or have not provided us any information in that regard. It means that they have the proper ground for this, why they have provided or they have not. So according to the information this time, what else they have provided us, we have opened in 42 countries and in 53 cities, 60 polling stations. And this time in Italy, Milan,
Presidente, abbiamo un problema col collegamento.
We seem to have a technical issue. We can no longer see or hear you, Mr. Chairman.
Non la sentiamo più.
We can't hear you anymore.
Okay, you were disappeared.
I'm here. Yeah, we were disconnected, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Some technical issues. So as for Ukraine, so even the Ukraine is the country. This is up to MFA. So as mentioned earlier, even in Israel case, at the beginning they have provided us with information that we have to open the poll there, and we did. But as mentioned yesterday, we received official letter from MFA indicating the risks of conducting the elections in Israel, and therefore in these upcoming days the Commission will discuss this issue. As for Ukraine, this is of course up to MFA, but as far as I understand, Ukraine is not conducting their own elections in their country, and of course this might be also a reason of not providing us information, opening the polling station in Ukraine. So, but this is the question referring to MFA, and if you would like to listen to some arguments why they have not provided us, I think even it's clear the argument why they have not done, but for more details, of course, you can apply to them. As for the here also has been mentioned the turnout abroad. And if we see dynamics from 2008 to 2012, 16, 20, general elections, I mean parliamentarian elections that has been conducted abroad, we can see the lower turnout abroad. And it's another indicator about the fact that the speculations, the so-called speculations on this issue is really groundless, because no one else knows the exact figures. The only figures that we receive, the official figures, is that MFA provides us. And according to the last update they have provided us, it was only 65,000 voters who are on a consulate registry and who have the right to participate in the election. So there might be some figures distributed on this regard about as if there are thousands of voters abroad, but of course it might have also the legal provisions in the law to give them right. And even 7th of October was the last deadline for voters who were not on consulate registry. They had the right to apply to the diplomatic mission, as well as they had the right to apply for election registration. And just these days, in these upcoming days, we will receive updated information where we will see within this time of period with how many voters this list has been increased. At the same time, when speaking about the vote count and repeat vote, it should be mentioned that the legitimacy will have the protocol that will be adopted manually. But for the purposes to announce the preliminary results, will be used the receipts that will be printed out from the machines. So, but from the 8 pilots that we have conducted in the country, we would say that the results counted by machine and the results manually counted or recounted, they match each other and they coincide each other. It's minor discrepancies that have objective grounds. So therefore, the hard copies of protocols will have the legitimacy, but for the announcement of preliminary results, the receipts will be transmitted. As for the information from foreign country interference, like as an example, it has been mentioned, Russia. So our focus and the majority of this information are related to electoral procedures, are related to the work of the election administration, are related to the discreditation of the election administration and to stigmatizing this process. So we have not identified such cases related to Russian intervention or any other country intervention. First of all, it has not been the area of our investigation. And second, even if we have investigated, of course, we have indicated it in our, or revealed such, but related to the work of related to the election and related to the integrity of the election. Of course, we have considered them in our reports, and this report available on our webpage because there are some aspects that we are not publicly responding, but we indicate in our reports and we disseminate this information to our international partners and so on and so forth. So I think I have not missed any questions, but if there are any follow-ups, okay. Thank you.
Grazie mille, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We will certainly be following the CEC's activities, both in Italy and in other countries. There is a lot of interest in making sure that the outcome of the elections will be as monitored as possible. Thank you very much indeed, and I wish you all the very best for the upcoming weeks, which I'm sure will be very intense for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Dichiaro conclusa l'audizione.